I was already bowled over by the Q Acoustics 5040 floor standing speaker that I had in for review. It's a compact floor standing speaker that's ideally suited for smaller rooms like mine. But I was curious to see how it would fare in a home theater setup, and also I didn't really want to send it back anytime soon, so I requested the center channel and they sent over the 5090 Ci. I already had the 5010s in-house from a prior review, and then Q Acoustics went and sent the brand new Q Sub100. It's their 10-inch middle model of subwoofers. And so I got a full 5.1 theater package for my small little listening space. And here's my thoughts. And as always, if you wouldn't mind just liking this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications and whatnot. It'll help me out a ton and help me get more products like this in for review. Now, of course, if you fancy a review of either the 5040s or the 5010s in isolation, I'll leave links down below in the description and you can follow those or watch those for those individual reviews. But for the uninitiated, here are the basic specs of this home theater package, starting with the 5040s. It features two 5-inch mid-bass drivers and a 1-inch tweeter in a Diapolito configuration. Frequency response is 39 Hz to 30 kHz. Nominal impedance is 6 ohms with a minimum of 3. Sensitivity is 91.5 decibels. Recommended amplifier power is 25 to 150 watts. Crossover frequency is 2.5 kHz. The measurements are 31.8 inches by 14.2 inches by 11.5 inches, and they weigh 39.7 pounds each. Up next is the 5090 Ci. This is a ported box center channel. It features two 4.5-inch mid-bass drivers and the same 1-inch tweeter. Frequency response is 57 Hz to 30 kHz. Nominal impedance is 6 ohms with a minimum of 3.2. Sensitivity is 90.5 decibels. Recommended amplifier power is 25 to 150 watts. Crossover frequency is 2.1 kHz. It measures 6.5 inches high by 16.9 inches wide by 9.6 inches deep, and it weighs 18.7 pounds. And as mentioned, I am using the Q Acoustics 5010 as rear speakers. These are the smallest speakers in the 5000 range. They come fitted with a single 4.5-inch mid-bass driver. High frequencies are handled by the very same 1-inch tweeter. Frequency response is 56 Hz to 30 kHz. Nominal impedance is 6 ohms with a minimum of 3.3. Sensitivity is 86.3 decibels. Recommended amplifier power is 15 to 90 watts. Crossover frequency is 2.5 kHz. It measures 10.4 inches high, 6.3 inches wide, and 10.4 inches deep, and they weigh 12.3 pounds each. And then, of course, the Sub100. This is a sealed box subwoofer. It's made from 18mm MDF with a 36mm baffle and internal dart bracing. The driver is surrounded by an aluminum demodulation ring. Max SPL at 1 meter is 111 decibels. Frequency response is 32 Hz to 250 Hz. The low-pass crossover range is 40 Hz to 250 Hz. Peak amplifier power is 500 watts. Continuous amplifier power is 250 watts. Total harmonic distortion at rated power is 0.09%. It measures 13.7 inches by 13.7 by 15, and they weigh 36.8 pounds each. As per my bias, I absolutely love Q Acoustic speakers. I think they look gorgeous, and these ones are no different. They feature a beautiful, dark, shiny acrylic baffle. The drivers are laminated with a layer of butyl rubber surround. Around the back, you have a single set of low-profile binding posts. It's available in satin black, satin white, Santos rosewood, and holm oak. I saw the rosewood and the holm oak in person, and I really do like the wood finishes of the speaker as well. It's one of the few instances where, or maybe it's happening more now, where I'm starting to like a lot of the wood finishes of these speakers. Q Acoustics does a really good job of them, but I think for the next Q Acoustics 5000 series speaker that I get in-house, or even one of the new 3000 series speakers, I'm going to request one of the wood finishes because I think they look pretty spiffy. All of these speakers feature a variation in size of that brand new C3 continuous curve cone mid-bass driver. The high-frequency drivers are fully hermetically sealed and mechanically isolated from the front baffle to protect from internal cabinet pressure and resonances from the mid-bass driver. The speaker grills are black, they are magnetic, they do have rounded edges, and they fit the speaker fairly well because the front speaker is black as well, that having them on doesn't feel like it's just an add-on to your speaker. They actually uniformly match the speaker nicely. The floor standers feature rear stabilizers and then spikes that are fitted to keep it stabilized on your floor because the bottom of the floor standers is rounded and it would fairly easily topple over, especially with my kids in the house if they just knocked it with their elbow or something. Fortunately, though, they do provide rubber covers for said spikes to help protect your floors. Now, I should note, or maybe I shouldn't, because this opinion is kind of my sample size of one opinion, where I move speakers around more than most people do because I'm an audio reviewer, and so I have to pick up said speaker and move it across the room, and I have to move speakers more than I imagine most people because my room is really small and I only have limited space for which to put speakers. But when I do move them around, the rubber covers do tend to fall off, so I have to just keep track of where they fell off so I could easily put them back on. But I doubt most people would be moving speakers around if these are your main speakers as much as I do. So maybe this is a bit of a non-issue. Maybe I should take this section out. I'll just leave it. They also supply foam bungs for your speaker, and you can insert those into the back of the speaker to help mitigate any bass boom in your speakers. I like myself a bit of bass boom, and especially for movies, I take the bungs out because I just want maximum impact for any of the crazy action movies that I like. But that aside, these speakers are gorgeous. They're a clear step up from the outgoing 3000 series. They look slick and they complement my living room nicely. I've always been a fan of Q Acoustics' industrial design, and this lineup does not disappoint. I think they look absolutely gorgeous. I love the fact that they've essentially just picked one universal design for all of their speakers. It's just rounded corners for everything. And then within each lineup, they just iterate, and then that's what differentiates each speaker lineup from the next while keeping the same housing. And therefore, every speaker from Q Acoustics looks very much like a Q Acoustics speaker, and then they can just change subtle things within each one. And the black acrylic front baffle on this 5000 lineup differentiates it from the 3000 series. I think it looks awesome. And then, I forgot to mention this off the top, but Q Acoustics also sent along some QED speaker cables. And this is my first go around with some proper speaker cables. I won't speak to an improvement in sound in any way, but it's just really nice to actually have a nice pair of speaker cables in-house for which to connect to a bunch of different speakers. And if I'm being honest, I use them for every other speaker review that I've had in-house since getting those cables. So, thank you. I set these speakers up where I do every other speaker that I get in for review, about 8 feet apart on either side of my media stand, about a foot away from the front wall. My room's on the smaller size, about 12 to 13 feet wide by 10 inches deep. It's open to the kitchen on the right side, and unfortunately I have floor-to-ceiling windows on the left. The Q Acoustics 5090 sits on my media unit, sandwiched between the Marantz Cinema 70 and a few different integrated amplifiers. These being the Cambridge Audio EXA 100, the Marantz Model 50, and the Advanced Paris MyConnect 250. My source was the Apple TV 4K, and that's it. Oh, wait, I forgot to talk about the 5010s. Forgive me if you've been watching my channel for a while, but if you're brand new, I built myself a shelf to fit behind my couch so that I could put rear speakers on it, therefore eliminating the need for end tables that I had previously. I drilled holes into it so like speaker wire can come up, and then I have the speakers on said shelf. My shelf is about 10 inches deep, and the 5010s are a little over 10 inches deep, so they do fit on it, but I have to place them on in a hard angle. Now, I do wish, somewhat selfishly, that Q Acoustics offered some sort of shallow or slim dedicated rear channel speaker like the likes of Dolly or Martin Logan that I've had in for review. I do understand maybe from a business case it doesn't sell as well as just a dedicated bookshelf speaker, but selfishly, it would be nice to have. The Sub100 was set up in two different places, first on the right and then also on the left. And on the left, against my floor-to-ceiling windows, I do find that's the location where I get the best bass response in my room, so eventually every subwoofer that I get in for review ends up over there. Also, prior to actually getting the Sub100, because that subwoofer arrived later than all of the other speakers, I used the QB12 subwoofer, also from Q Acoustics. It's their older, much larger 12-inch subwoofer, and I used that for a while, and if I'm being honest, Admittedly, I also implemented the Martin Logan Dynamo 10 subwoofer because I can connect up to 2 subwoofers to the Marantz Cinema 70, so why would I not do this? And I like a little bit of extra oomph, so I did that too. As mentioned, I already did a dedicated 5040 review, and if you want to watch a review where I talk about music and how it performed with music, you can, again, watch the video and the link down below in the description, but this is a movie review. But if I had to just rehash, they are very well-pointed, balanced, somewhat neutral-sounding speakers with a ton of detail if the recording called for it, but crucially, they are a compact floor standing speaker that happens to sound gigantic in my smallest room. My first outing with the speaker package was, sorry everyone, it was night 2 of WrestleMania 41, a big live event. You get a huge crowd, you get pyro, you get music, you have entrances, it's a long show. Oh, and you have commentary as well. And this proved to be a perfect event to watch on a speaker package that I just get in, just because it has a bit of everything. I had also just built my rear shelf for my rear speakers, and so it was a really nice test altogether. One thing I noticed off the bat though was the commentary just came in really hot and really loud. And I noticed it on night 1 when I had the Dali Opticon package in place. The commentary was just a little bit more overwhelming, and dialing it back just helped me feel more immersed in the proceedings. But I did notice that going forward, when I did watch movies, that the dialogue coming through the center channel was just a bit more prominent and a bit more focused towards my listening position. It didn't feel like, just overall, that it was dispersing as much as it did with other speakers. Now, I'm pretty sure that this focused sound towards my listening position from the center channel is a sample size of one issue, where I previously had the 3090 Ci, and when I lived in a much larger home, I never felt that the sound was overly focused on my listening position, but I was also sitting about 15 feet away from the center channel. So I feel like the sound had enough room to properly spread out into the room. But given the fact that I'm about 8 or 9 feet away from this speaker, I'm not sure if it has enough room to properly expand, is that the right term? Expand the sound towards me. And this theory is backed up by the 5010s, which are only 2 to 3 feet away from my listening position. So they don't have enough room for the sound to properly project out into the room. So I do feel like, ideally, you would need a somewhat larger room than mine to feel properly immersed in sound. If I was to pick anything, get the rear speakers further away from your ears than I do have them placed. This focused sound, though, I noticed it not just with WrestleMania 41, but also when I was watching Interstellar. That center channel, the dialogue was just so focused on my sweet spot listening position that if I did move couch positions from left to right, that it didn't quite sound the same, and I felt like, ooh, I'm not in the right position. Sitting dead center on the couch was ideal. 80% of the time, it's just me sitting dead center on the couch watching movies, and so getting perfectly focused sound towards my listening position is kind of a boon, and then I can just go into the receiver and just adjust all the speaker settings to dial in the sound perfectly for me. Kind of awesome. And when I watched Interstellar, that scene right before they fly into the wormhole and they're explaining how a black hole works to a guy that flies a spaceship, I feel like you wouldn't need to explain that. I feel like that scene was made for me, or like, how does a black hole work? Here's how a black hole works. Let's fly into it. But them just talking with a subtle bit of ambience going around each speaker was really nice. And when they flew into the black hole and all the speakers opened up, oh my goodness, it was perfect. And this is where that focused sound from the center channel was ideal, because while they were talking and while all that craziness is happening in the surround, while the subwoofer's firing, I can hear them perfectly clear. And it speaks to a perfectly well mixed movie, but also a really nice directed center channel. So maybe that directivity is a welcome thing. Now, during the wormhole scene, the subwoofer is, of course, engaged all the time. It does a really good job of filling in the low end, making the scene feel really big in my space. But it's not a subterranean subwoofer. It does roll off at 32 Hertz, so my chest isn't rattling. But so long as you temper your expectations on what the subwoofer can provide, I found that it does provide a fast, clean, and tight bass, and I find it works especially well for music. So if you want a dual-purpose subwoofer that doesn't overpower the proceedings, but does enough to fill in that low-end presence, then this is a really good subwoofer for your purposes. The subwoofer control is fairly easy and straightforward. I do find that I have to adjust the gain setting on the subwoofer to about 65 to 75% to get a comparable bass output to other subwoofers that I have in-house. This was a bit of a learning process for me because when I first got the subwoofer in, I thought something was malfunctioning or something was wrong with it. I just wasn't getting enough output because usually for subwoofers, I dial them in at about 20 to 30%. On the Dynamo 10, for example, I have it at 18%, and that gets my chest rattling. But gain settings are different on different subs, and after a lot of trial and error and actually contacting Q Acoustics, I realized that my knowledge of gain settings within subwoofers could use a bit of work. So yeah, dialing in at about 65 to 75%, for me, for my tastes, for my room, I find that works really well. When I did just have these speakers, before I built my couch shelf, and before I had the Q Sub100, I used the QB12 subwoofer, and I have used that subwoofer in multiple locations in both a big room and a small one like this. And it does a good job of just filling in that low end. It has a larger driver overall. It goes deep enough to satiate my taste. It's not, again, a subterranean subwoofer, but it works really well. Comparing it to the Sub100, I do find the gain setting is a bit different. I do have to crank up the Sub100 more than I do the QB12, but comparatively, there's not much of a difference between them. I find that the Sub100 digs as low without doing any actual measurements of my own, as low as the QB12, regardless of what the specifications might read. I do like the fact that the Sub100 takes up less space than the QB12. The QB12 is more like a end table in my space. And then I decided to switch out the Marantz Model 50 for the Cambridge Audio EXA 100. That amplifier I found in my listening test worked better with the Q Acoustics 5040s. It just controlled the drivers more, gave it more detail, a bit more impact overall. And then crucially, it does one thing that the Marantz Model 50 doesn't do, that when you use the amp in power amp mode connected to an AV receiver, it doesn't disable the subwoofer output. So I can connect a subwoofer to the EXA 100s and then run a full range signal from the Marantz Cinema 70 to the EXA 100 and then connect a subwoofer and make the fronts feel like full range fronts. So I decided to move the Sub100 from the left over to the right, connected to the EXA 100, and then connect the Dynamo 10 subwoofer to the Marantz Cinema 70 and use that for that subterranean bass for movies. And then that opening scene in Dunkirk where it goes from dead quiet in the small town to bullets flying in from everywhere. In my optimal seating position on my couch, I felt fully immersed in the sound. Bullets felt like they were coming in from everywhere. And then when things really opened up, all the subs were firing properly. The front sounded really huge. I love this setup. And then, of course, every time I start watching that opening scene from Dunkirk, I end up just watching it all the way through. It's such a great movie, and it sounds amazing on this system. And then, of course, as I mentioned off the top, I did switch out amplifiers to the Advanced Paris My Connect 250. This section should really not be part of this review, but I did tinker with this, so I'm telling you about it. But that integrated all-in-one amplifier is a bit overkill for my space and my use purposes, but it does allow you to do a few different things. And notably, you can connect up to 3 different speakers to it, and then you also have dual sub-outs. So I could connect for my entire system up to 4 subwoofers, and that's something I did. So what I did is I brought in the SVS micros. I have 2 of them, the 3000 micros. I connected one to the Advanced Paris alongside the Sub100, and then I connected another one to the Marantz Cinema 70 alongside the Dynamo 10 subwoofer. And then I had just full immersion, overkill bass altogether. And then I brought in the Martin Logan F10s that I also had in for review, and this allowed me to extend the front stage. I know it's not an ideal surround setup, but I did, and honestly, it sounded really good. You do hear me reference my sample size of one use case a lot in my reviews, and it's because my room is fairly small, and so for a dedicated theater package, I am kind of constrained by the confines of my room. And because of this, I do feel like the Dolly package and also the Martin Logan package did feel a bit more immersive in my space. So if you did have a room that's slightly larger than mine, say 15 by 15, would give these speakers enough room to properly disperse the sound and make it feel a bit more immersive overall. This is a beautiful, stylish, and more importantly, great speaker package, and it's tailor-made for those like me that listen to music and also watch movies in the same space. Providing that your room is slightly larger than mine, allowing these surround speakers to properly disperse the sound and make it feel a bit more immersive, then I think you're gravy. If you do have a chance, go and listen to these speakers. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching.